You are in the baby food aisle. 47 options. Pouches and jars and little tubs with smiling cartoon faces. Sweet potato. Apple and pear. A puree with a colorful brain graphic on the label specifically designed for brain development. You read the ingredients. Sugar, modified starch, natural flavoring. You put it back. You pick up another one. Same thing. You choose the one with the fewest ingredients and leave. And somewhere in Japan, a mother has never seen this aisle. Her 6-month-old is eating something your baby's pediatrician has probably never mentioned, not because it is expensive or requires special equipment, because it comes from a food culture that has been feeding babies for brain development for over 1,000 years. Before the brain graphics existed on pouches, before any of it. These 5 foods are what Japanese families give their babies first, what they contain. Why the developing brain responds to them differently than it responds to anything in that aisle. Stay. Because what your baby eats in the next 6 months is building their brain, and right now you probably do not know what actually builds it. In Japan, the introduction of solid foods is called Reinyu, and from the very first meal the approach is built around something Western weaning almost entirely ignores, the understanding that the foods a baby eats in the first months of solid eating are not just nutrition, they are neurological input, the beginning of a relationship between the baby's gut and the baby's brain that will shape cognition, mood, and immune function for decades. Japanese first foods are not chosen for sweetness or ease. They are chosen for what they give the developing brain that nothing else can. The very first food most Japanese babies receive is not a fruit, not a vegetable, not a grain. It is a broth. Dashi is a simple stock, made from kombu, a dried seaweed, and katsuobushi, dried bonito fish flakes. It is the base of almost everything in Japanese cuisine, and it is often the first thing a baby tastes, before any solid food has been introduced. A few drops on the tongue, then a spoonful. Why dashi first? Dashi is one of the richest naturally occurring sources of glutamate on Earth. Glutamate is the primary excitatory neurotransmitter in the developing brain, the chemical that drives the formation of new neural connections, the strengthening of pathways between neurons that makes the brain faster and more capable. Breast milk is the richest source of glutamate most babies receive. Dashi is the closest food equivalent. Japanese mothers have given their babies dashi as a first food for generations, not because they read a neuroscience paper, because they observed what happened to babies raised on it. But dashi is doing something else too. It is calibrating the baby's palate toward savory, mineral, complex flavors before sweet ones arrive. The tastes a baby is exposed to first become the tastes they accept most readily. A baby introduced to sweet purées first builds a palate biased toward sweetness. A baby introduced to dashi first builds a palate ready for everything. The first flavor your baby learns to love becomes the flavor their brain expects food to taste like. Japanese weaning starts with the most complex flavor. Western weaning almost always starts with the sweetest. Western weaning introduces rice as a processed instant cereal, a powder mixed with water, designed to be bland, smooth, inoffensive. Japanese weaning introduces okoyu, whole rice cooked slowly in 10 parts water until it becomes a soft, creamy porridge. Not a processed powder, the actual grain broken down by time and heat into something a baby can absorb. The difference is not cosmetic. Whole rice retains B vitamins that are stripped from processed rice products. And B vitamins are critical for myelin production, the sheath that insulates nerve fibers and makes neural transmission faster. A baby receiving adequate B vitamins from their first solid foods is giving their brain the material it needs to build speed into its own wiring. Okayu is also the first lesson in texture, not completely smooth, not completely lumpy. It trains the baby's mouth and tongue to manage food before anything more complex arrives. That oral preparation matters later for speech in ways most parents never connect to weaning. Slow-cooked whole grain porridge from a single ingredient contains more genuine nutrition than any instant rice cereal, and it takes 12 minutes to make. The effort is not significant. The difference is, tofu is introduced in Japan within the first 2 weeks of solid feeding. Silken tofu. Smooth, soft, requiring almost no preparation beyond a gentle mash. Western weaning tends to delay protein. The concern is allergens, digestibility, texture. Tofu gets categorized as advanced, something for later. This is backwards. Tofu is one of the most bioavailable protein sources a baby can receive, and protein in the first months of solid feeding is not just for physical growth. It is the substrate from which the brain builds its entire chemical communication system. Neurotransmitters are made from amino acids. The brain cannot synthesize them from nothing. Every signal that travels between neurons, every chemical that regulates mood, attention, and calm, requires protein as its raw material. Tofu contains all of these precursors in a form the developing body can absorb and use immediately. Beyond the protein, tofu contains choline, a nutrient critical for memory formation, learning, and the structural integrity of brain cell membranes. Babies who receive adequate choline in the first year show measurably stronger memory and cognitive flexibility at 4 years old compared to those who do not. Silken tofu, a few grams gently mashed, available in every supermarket. One of the most brain-supportive first foods that exists, and Western weaning guides almost never mention it. Sweet potato appears on both Western and Japanese weaning lists, so this one requires a closer look, because the sweet potato in a Japanese baby's bowl and the sweet potato in a Western pouch are not giving the baby the same thing. Japanese sweet potato, a variety called satsumimo, has a drier, less sweet flesh than the orange variety in Western baby food. It is steamed or slow roasted, never pureed with added starch, and served alongside dashi with a small amount of fat, typically sesame oil or the natural fat from the fish in the broth. That fat is not incidental. It is the entire point. Sweet potato is one of the richest sources of beta-carotene available as a first food. The body converts beta-carotene to vitamin A, and vitamin A is critical for the development of the visual cortex and the myelination of the optic nerve. The baby who receives adequate vitamin A in the first months of solid feeding is building better visual processing capacity than the baby who does not. But beta-carotene is fat-soluble. It requires dietary fat to be absorbed. Served without fat, most of it passes through the body unused. Western sweet potato purees served alone deliver a fraction of the beta-carotene their labels suggest. The Japanese approach pairs the food with the nutrient's own absorption mechanism. Automatically, without anyone needing to understand the biochemistry, the food is the same. What surrounds it is completely different. And that difference is the difference between a food and a nutritional strategy. This is the one most Western parents will not recognize, and it is the most important one on this list. Shirasu are tiny white fish, the larvae of sardines and anchovies, served in Japan as one of the first fish-based weaning foods. Mild enough to be accepted easily by babies introduced to dashi first, and gram for gram, one of the most nutrient-dense first foods that exists. Here is what shirasu contains that nothing in the baby food aisle can match. DHA, the omega-3 fatty acid that is the primary structural component of brain tissue. 60% of the dry weight of the human brain is fat. 40% of that fat is DHA. A baby's brain in the first year is adding DHA at a rate it will never match again. Every new neural connection, every synapse that forms, every piece of myelin that insulates a nerve fiber requires DHA to build correctly. Shirasu contains DHA in its most bioavailable form, not as a supplement, as whole food fat embedded in whole food protein, surrounded by the complete matrix of cofactors that allows it to be absorbed and used most efficiently. Compare this to the DHA-fortified pouch. The fish oil is extracted, isolated, and added back in. The bioavailability is not the same. The cofactors are not present. The absorption is measurably lower. The label says DHA. The body receives less of it. Shirasu also delivers calcium, iodine, and vitamin D, alongside the DHA, each one working with the others in the way whole food nutrients always do. Not as isolated additions, as a complete package. Shirasu is available dried in most Asian supermarkets, a small amount mixed into okayu from the first weeks of weaning. Nothing elaborate, just the most concentrated naturally occurring source of what the developing brain needs most. The brain that gets DHA from whole food in the first year builds differently from the brain that gets it from a supplement. Japanese weaning has understood this for centuries. The research has spent decades confirming it. Look at what these 5 foods have in common. None of them are sweet. None of them are in a pouch. Every single one is a whole food that a Japanese grandmother would recognize, that requires minimal preparation, that costs less than the branded alternative. Japanese weaning is not a trend. It is not borrowed from another culture for novelty. It is a food tradition built over generations around a simple observation. Babies who eat this way develop differently, not anecdotally, observably. Japan produces some of the highest cognitive performance metrics in the world among children. The food they start life on is not a footnote. It is a foundation. Dashi, okayu, tofu, sweet potato served with fat, shirasu, 5 foods. Whole, simple, available, and building something in the developing brain that 47 options in the baby food aisle are not. You do not have to overhaul your entire weaning approach. Start with one thing this week. Make a small amount of dashi. Slow cook some rice into okayu. Pick up a block of silken tofu. See what your baby does with a flavor that is not sweetened, not processed, not designed in a factory to taste good enough to buy again. Their brain is building right now. In this window, at this pace, it will not be this open to nutritional input again. The food you give them in the next 6 months is not just feeding them. It is building the organ they will think with for the rest of their life. They deserve what actually works. Now you know what that is. Share this with a parent who is standing in the baby food aisle right now reading ingredients and not finding answers. The answers were not in the aisle. Subscribe for more. See you in the next one.